Welcome back. Recently, New York State Governor Kathy Hochul proposed a program targeted at specific benefits and housing obligations, similar to the former 421A program for development proposals in the Gowanus neighborhood of Brooklyn. This alternative aims to assist projects that miss out on the property tax break provided by 421A. It's part of a series of initiatives announced by the governor to support increased housing construction following the legislature's rejection of her broader January proposal. Joining us now is the CEO of M.N.S, Andrew Barrocas. Andrew, thank you so much for joining me.
All right, thanks so much for having me.
So can you first just let everybody know a little bit more about M.N.S?
Sure. So we're a new development marketing firm that specializes in ground-up construction rentals. We handle the leasing, marketing, advertising. We get involved in the pre-development planning of a lot of buildings throughout Brooklyn, Queens, and Manhattan. And we've been involved with over 500 new construction rental buildings throughout the city.
Now, can you tell us a little bit more about Governor Hochul's alternative proposal for projects that missed out on the 421A property tax break in Gowanus?
Yeah, so it gives an advantage to developers. These are large-scale developments that are happening in this area, and generally it's taking about 3 years for these projects to be completed. And the biggest issue was the deadline of completing these projects in order to be eligible for the 421A tax abatement was the end of 2026. So it really prohibited developers in getting banks comfortable with financing these projects, and it would have really halted a lot of development there that would have, been a huge, disadvantage to the growth of the neighborhood, providing more housing, both market and affordable housing.
Now, why was Gowanus chosen as the area to test this alternative to the 421A program?
So it was an area that had a high concentration of new development, large-scale development that are really, those were the ones that were, really, those are the projects that were the largest scale, I would say. So they were, they were really that deadline really created, made it challenging for them to get financing and really get going. So, this is an area that really will benefit from the development, not only in this area, but all the surrounding neighborhoods. So, I'm happy to see that this was an area that was chosen. There's obviously a lot of other areas that have high concentrations of development that would also benefit from this program. So I'm happy to see that it was chosen. We're working on several projects in the area, and I think it's instrumental to the continued growth of the neighborhood and surrounding neighborhoods.
Now, how many housing units are estimated to be in jeopardy without a tax break in Gowanus, and what impact could this alternative have on the situation?
Yeah, so this impacted thousands of units, on both affordable and free market units in this immediate area. So they'll definitely have a benefit on several projects in the area that, wouldn't have been able to be built without it. So, time will tell how many, will be able to take advantage of it, because it still is limited to projects that had their footings in the ground and had started construction before the end of the expiration of the old 421A. So there are still limitations. There are definitely projects that will not be built because of no 421A. So it doesn't help every single project in the area, but it definitely will be an advantage to some of them.
Now, how does this new program address concerns raised by construction unions regarding labor standards and wages?
Yeah, so they basically want similar similar program to what they had in the current 421A and protection with wages. And something that they obviously are pushing for is increasing wages. So, they just want to make sure that they're protected the same way that they were with, 421A.
What are the potential challenges developers might face if they opt for the new program instead of the 421A tax break?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I guess the biggest hurdle that they're going to experience is time, and that's really what kills a lot of these development projects is time. And I would say that this program, although it's an advantage to those programs that wouldn't have been able to be built without it, they will take about a year before construction starts in these projects. So that's really the biggest downside of it is time. And I would say that you won't see one of these projects you know continue in development for another year or so.
Now, I kind of want to expand on the idea of the challenges that developers may face. I know that just walking around New York City, there's so many new buildings and new areas that are coming around. Can you just talk about the challenges that just come with being in that field? And I understand that there's a high need for new buildings in New York City. So, what are some just overall challenges, just in general, in this field?
Yeah, so up until the expiration of 421A, it was really encouraged for development in New York City, and we had an as of right, area that could be developed, and it was definitely pro development in a lot of ways. We've been involved with 500 new construction rental projects, and one thing that they all had in common was that they all had a 421A tax abatement. So there's really no way of building new construction rental housing without some sort of abatement. So it's definitely needed in order to continue the growth and meet the demand. And it's unfortunate that we'll have a period of time where new rental housing will not be developed. Call it 2026 to however long it goes without having some sort of abatement. But at that period of time, just based on simple, supply and demand, it's going to create a shortage of rental housing, and it's going to create a spike in rental pricing. And in addition to that, it's not going to help, with creating more affordable housing because this 421A program is really the biggest driver of creating affordable housing. And if we want to create more of it, which I'm a big fan of, and I know we need it, we need to work together and have programs that make it an advantage to build them. Obviously, right now it just doesn't work, and it doesn't help having articles that come out in the New York Times saying that this 421A program, uses $1.7 billion of our budget, and doesn't talk about the advantage that it brings $2.5 billion to the city. So although there's a big number being spent, there's a lot more being made from it. So it's unfortunate that the news could portray these things and push them one way or another. But at the end of the day, I can tell you, from doing this 20 years and 500 projects, that every one of them have that same one thing in common, which is this tax abatement. So we need it. It's great for the city. These tax abatements expire. These buildings are paying full taxes. So it's definitely a benefit to the city and to the renters as a whole.
And I want to thank you so much for sharing that because I think that for the average New Yorker and maybe who's working in a different field or someone who just lives in New York City, we don't get to, I guess, hear from people like you and the work that you do. So I could totally understand why someone may view it and have a certain opinion. But I think that's why conversations like these are really important, so we can hear from people like you and the work that goes into, as you mentioned, something that has a very high demand. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on this. Obviously, it trickles down, and not having this abatement is detrimental to everybody from the person who stocks the truck to deliver appliances to all that chain reaction of people involved in the development project. And there's a ton of people that will be out of work because we don't have this abatement. So it's a lot bigger than people think. And that's one of the issues that I have is that you can't it can't be one or the other. It's got to work for everyone.
Hmm.
And I think that there were flaws with Affordable New York, the old 421A plan. But instead of getting rid of it in entirety, like maybe come up with different ways that it could be more beneficial. For instance, one of the issues is that a lot of people think that the 130 AMI level is not really affordable, and it doesn't really benefit enough people in New York City. I would say that it does benefit a lot of people in New York City. That's not necessarily where we have our biggest issue. We have our biggest issue in the lower AMI levels. And the reason why developers chose the higher AMI level is because that was what made more financial sense from a business standpoint. So all developers chose that. Now they've been, portrayed as like the bad person, the bad group in this equation, when they just chose that because that was part of the plan that they could choose. Now the city just needs to change it. They need to make that part of the plan to have 130 AMI, maybe less tax less tax, advantageous. So there are ways to offset it, without getting rid of it in entirety. So, I think just kind of working through these things and talking, about them. A lot of times, decisions are made and they just don't kind of walk through all the different scenarios. It's, you could take the hotel industry, 2 years ago, they decided to change that all hotels built in New York City needed to be union. And in the last 2 years, zero new hotels have been built. And the reason is because it doesn't make financial sense to do it. So there are none being built, there are none being financed. So it's not even like you could have a developer who says, okay, I want to try this. The banks won't even finance it to allow you to try it. So you really need to walk through all these things. Meanwhile, there's a lot of people that are in the industry of building hotels that are now being impacted in New York because they made this decision. So, I just don't like making decisions that aren't kind of thought out, and all the repercussions of them. Because at the end of the day, them, getting rid of 421A is going to lose the city money. It's going to, it's going to increase the price of fair market apartments. It's going to decrease the amount of affordable units, and it's going to eliminate a ton of jobs that are created from these large scale developments that are built. It's not just the people on site, it's all the people that are supplying materials and other trades to these projects. So, this is definitely a very big issue. And, I think what Hochul's currently doing is at least what a forward thinking and coming up with a solution, although it doesn't work for every project and it doesn't work for every developer, it could work for certain developers. So I think it is forward thinking, and we need more of this in order to overcome what we're currently dealing with, which is not having anything.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us and having this conversation and, shedding some light on some things that I personally didn't really know much about before. So once again, I just truly appreciate that. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. It was nice speaking with you.